Okay, first of all, let me go over how to get the area of a of a circle. Let's say I have a circle. Let's assume this is a circle. And let's say I cut it into 4 parts right there. And let's say I cut it into half. So there's 8 little squares. And in each of these, let's say I was to line them up. One facing this way, and then the other one facing the other way, like this. And then there's how many? 8 of them. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. If I was to cut it into eight shapes, it looks like this. Now, let's say I was to cut it into like a million shapes or a billion shapes. Let's say I was to cut them very, very small. Ends up looking like this. Now, that's a parallelogram, right? That's a parallelogram. So circles end up looking like a parallelogram. And for parallelograms, don't I go base times height? Because I treat them like a rectangle. Base times height. Now, what's the height of this parallelogram? Wouldn't be the radius? Isn't this the radius? Because remember, that's how big this thing was. Okay, the height is the radius. Now, notice when I was cutting and I was flipping my shapes one side to the other, let me do this in blue. Isn't this half of the diameter or the circumference, I mean? Because this is the other half of the circumference. Remember, circumference is the distance around the circle. I remember back in the days, somebody told me that the circumference was diameter times pi. Now, diameter is basically 2 times the radius times pi. Now, that's the whole circumference. So doesn't that mean that this is just radius times pi? Not the 2, because remember that the base is half of the circumference. So basically what I did was 2 times radius times pi, I divided by 2. So now this thing, I know I just have to go radius times pi times radius, right? The base times the height. Radius times pi times radius, which is known as radius squared pi. Beautiful. So as long as I know the radius, I'm going to go radius squared times pi. So let's take a look at question number 23. The instructions to begin with says find the area of each, use 3.144 pi, and round your answer to the nearest tenth. So round your answer to 1 decimal place, not the work. And I just told you guys the formula for this, we figure it out, is going to be radius squared times pi. Now the radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside. So this is going to be 2 squared, because you guys can see the radius is 2. So radius squared. Now for pi, it says use 3.14 for pi. Okay. Let me grab my calculator and I have it ready here. So I'm going to go 2 squared. You guys see that, how it does the squared? And then times 3.14. And it tells me 12.56. Now I have to round it to 1 decimal place, right? So I'm going to call that 12.6. That's it. 12.6. Let's take a look at number 24. This is the radius. The radius is 3.9. Now just remember the area is radius squared times pi. So I'm going to go 3.9 squared times 3.14. Let me grab my calculator. Let me clear this out. 3.9 squared times 3.14. And it says 47.7594. I have to run it to one decimal place. The 5 is big enough, so I'm going to call this 47.8. Nice. Now let's take a look at number 25. That's not the radius. The radius is only half of that. That's actually what we call diameter. Now, because the diameter is 6, I'm going to say the radius is 3. Let me show you guys question number 23. See how I only gave you guys half of the diameter, right? Notice from the center out. Look at number 25. I gave you the whole thing. So when I gave you the diameter, cut it in half. So, because you need the radius, you don't need the diameter. Okay, so I'm gonna go, I know the area, it's radius squared times pi. So I'm gonna go 3 squared times 3.14. Okay, let me clear this out. I'm gonna go 3 squared times 3.14. It says 28.26. When I round it, it's 28.3. Beautiful. So 28.3. Now, number 26, I don't see a figure. It says the circumference is 31.4. But don't I know that the circumference is 2 times radius times pi. And this is equal to 31.4. Let me divide by 2. So radius times pi is equal to, now 31.4, I'm not going to use this calculator anymore. I'm just going to do this at the side. 31.4 divided by 2 is 15.7. To get the radius by itself, let me divide both sides by pi. So I'm gonna, on my calculator, I'm gonna type in 15.7 divided by 3.14. 15.7 divided by 3.14. So I get that the radius is 5. Okay, I know the radius now. So now for the area, I'm gonna go 5 squared times pi. So the way I'm gonna type this will be 5 squared times 3.14. And that's gonna give me 78.5. So it is easy when I have the figured, because I can see that the radius is given. But some questions on your homework, I'm gonna give you information of the circle. So circumference, once I give you the circumference, you have to find the radius. And once you have the radius, you can find the area of the circle.